And I did want to just say a few words about how this panel discussion came to be. It's the second panel that we have sponsored and worked with April Ryan to bring to various parts of our community, called Race in America Today. The first one we did last fall, it was so awesome. I just have to say, it was so awesome that a lot of people came up to us, came up to April and said, can you do it again? And she was eager to do it again. We were eager to do it again. And thus we are all here tonight with a truly extraordinary group of panelists who I hope will provoke us and cajole us and inspire us to think more deeply about race in America today, which is the subject of tonight's panel, and other things as well, and hopefully to act. And I think, of course, it's fitting that it is Black History Month and we are convening in Black History Month. I hope you have a chance to check out our Black History Month display at our main store up in Connecticut Avenue, as well as here in some of the other busboys. We take opportunity of the month to do a special celebration of both the Black experience in America and also Black authors. But that said, this whole exercise would serve very little purpose if we were only reading and talking and thinking and discussing this issue during 1 month of the year. It must be an ongoing conversation. Absolutely must be an ongoing conversation. It must take place for more than 1 month. So to drive that point home, we're all hoping that if you tweet about tonight, you will join in our hashtag more than a month. And please do tweet, please do whatever kind of social media you can. Keep this conversation alive, keep the ideas flowing, keep the discussion going. It's really an important part of who we are as a people and how we can all work together to make much needed progress in this country. Now, I wish I could take credit for this panel, but as I said, it was really April's idea. And I want to thank you so much for bringing us the first one and now bringing us the second one. We love working with April. I hope you've all read her book, The Presidency in Black and White. It came out last winter. It's won awards. It's terrific. And she's going to be introducing our panel in greater depth. She also will be moderating the panel. I just want to say thank you, Governor Wilder, for coming here and being with us. I'm sure some of you have read and hopefully have read. He's an author, he's a public servant, he's been a politician, he's been an activist, he's done it all. He's got a memoir out called Son of Virginia. I hope you will please read it if you haven't already. We also were so privileged to have you at our store, so thank you for that. And we also have Professor Eddie S. Glaude Jr. He's got his second book out, Democracy in Black. Absolutely essential book. You must read it. It's been called part memoir, part polemic, part history, but let's face it, all those things together makes up for a very passionate and brilliant examination of Black life in America today. Definitely essential reading. And then I had to leave Wes Moore for last because Wes is my old and dear friend. I've known Wes since he was a kid. Well, if a kid is 22, so I'm really not a kid, but a young adult. And when I first met Wes, I was like, wait, this guy can't be for real. Like, you can't be this smart and this nice and this talented and this giving and this, everything good. And he truly is. He's an amazing guy. You'll hear more about him from April. He, of course, also has written some incredible books. The Other Wes Moore, which I hope everyone has read, especially all of you students. You got to read it. And then his latest book, The Work. And now for April, who's the creative force behind this. You probably know April as a familiar voice on American Urban Radio, a longtime commentator on American politics. She's been a reporter for more than 30 years and, of course, has covered a lot of different people and presidents. She's been a White House correspondent for AUR since 1997. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. She's covered them all. Her first book was published last year. It was a long time in the making. Very long. And it's a compilation of many, many ideas and insights that she gained in observing the people and events that define the American presidency. And the good news is she's got a second book she's working on. And so we're really looking forward to that. Most important is what she does with her reporting. She's one of far too few African-American journalists assigned to the White House beat, but she has been intent since day one on using her platform to bring news and information to communities often ignored or marginalized by the news media. And over the years, she has become a news outlet unto herself, a resource for millions, literally millions of Americans who might otherwise be left in the dark about how events in the news are affecting their lives, their families, and their communities. So, along with all those journalistic awards, I believe she deserves a massive public service award. She's an amazing person. She's made amazing contributions to our country. Thank you all so much for being here. It's such a privilege for us to host all of you. And you're on. Thank you.
Wow, guys. Let's thank Lissa and Politics and Prose for offering to put this to be able to think forward and hold a conversation. Everyone doesn't support this kind of conversation. Let's give Politics and Prose a big round of applause. And Lissa, thank you so much. We've been around the nation, and I think I can say this is one of the most progressive and one of the best bookstores there is in the nation, and we should be very thankful. Amen. Amen, my brother from Baltimore. We should be very thankful that we have Politics and Prose and Lissa. Now, I want to thank all of you for being here, number one. I mean, give yourselves a big round of applause. We're going to have a big dynamic conversation, and the diversity of this crowd is amazing. We want to talk to everyone. We want to hear what everyone feels, and we want to have honest discussion. And before we start, there's a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to break the internet tonight. We're going to put it on, as the kids say, on fleek, okay? I want you guys to remember the hashtag, more than a month. How many of you are on Twitter right now? Come on now, get on the internet, tweet, more than a month. If you're on Periscope, more than a month. Let's make everyone see this conversation because the world needs to hear it at a time that we need it. And I also want to recognize, there are a couple of authors in the house, Lissa. I want to recognize first Jesse Holland. I think I saw him. Jesse, raise your hand. AP reporter who wrote the book, The Invisibles, The Untold Story of African American Slaves in the White House. Jesse, thanks for joining us. And I think there's a woman that I ran into at the Image Awards, the NAACP Image Awards. Is she in the house? Victoria? Yes, she is. I want to introduce you to Victoria Christopher Murray. Now, I just ran into her Thursday night. I lost the Image Award. I got a nomination, but I lost the Image Award. But guess what? We have in the house with us Victoria Christopher Murray, the NAACP Image Award winner for the book Stand Your Ground, and she won in the Outstanding Literary Work Fiction category. Victoria, raise your hand. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you for coming. Victoria, come down front. Take a seat down front if you can. Wayne, can you bring Victoria down? Thank you so much. Now, again, this is the second installment of the Authors Race Panel discussion by Politics and Prose. And with us this evening are several very well-known authors, very well-known in other segments of culture, pop culture. They're icons on their own, and then they've written books. And with us this evening, elder statesman, former governor, Virginia Governor Doug Wilder, the author of the book, The Son of Virginia, A Life in America's Political Arena. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Governor Wilder. He was the nation's first elected African-American governor. He was the first African-American elected governor of Virginia as well. Douglas Wilder began his career in public office by winning a 1969 special election for the Virginia State Senate from a Richmond area district. He was the first African-American elected to the Virginia Senate since Reconstruction. Let's give Governor Wilder a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Governor Wilder, for coming. Ed S. Glaud Jr., the author of Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul. Can we say that one again? Wow. He's an associate professor of religion and Africana Studies at Bowdoin College. He is the author of Exodus, Religion, Race, and Nation in Early 19th Century Black America, also published by the University of Chicago Press. Let's give Professor Glaud a big round of applause. And I want to talk about this gentleman right next to me. He's a homeboy from Baltimore, just down the road, up 95, Baltimore, Maryland. You know, sometimes they say, what comes out of Baltimore? Greatness comes out of Baltimore. Survival and greatness. It's about self-discovery for this man, Wes Moore, an acclaimed author, best-selling author, Army vet, former Rhodes Scholar, and a native of Baltimore. He's the author of the powerful and inspirational book, The Other Westmore. It's a book about self-discovery from Baltimore. We're pleased to have Wes with us tonight. He's also the author of the new book, The Work, Searching for the Life That Matters. And of course, once again, he authored the best-selling book, The Other Westmore. Let's give Wes a big round of applause. I want to start off the discussion with a few observances. February 10th, tomorrow, is a historic day. In 1964, after 10 days of debate and voting on 125 amendments, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by a vote of 290 to 130. The bill prohibited any state or local government or public facility from denying access to anyone because of race or ethnic origin. It further gave the U.S. Attorney General the power to bring school desegregation lawsuits. And let's fast forward 50 years. February 9th, 2016. Governor Wilder, I'm going to talk to you about that. Where are we now looking back? I know, 50 years.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, April, for ordering me to be here.
No, sir, I love you.
I think Wes and Eddie will agree that they were likewise ordered to be here. And if people have said your book is a long time coming, I've only written one book, and I just finished that in November of last year. I said also to Professor Glaude that, Dr. Glaude, that I enjoyed my earlier comments with him this evening because he's younger, and it doesn't sound as bad coming from him, the cynicism that might come from me. But I'm not at all happy, nor pleased with where we are in America today. I wasn't happy last year or the year before that. I've never been happy about it. Because race is something that has to be discussed if it is not to be an issue. And if you don't want to discuss it, then you don't want to deal with reality. And I was reminding Eddie earlier that I was this last Saturday at a funeral and talking about I'd just been elected to the state senate. I hadn't been sworn in. This was in December. I wasn't sworn in until January, and yet there were a group of students and professors coming to me from Virginia State College at the time because they had the Department of Agriculture professors moved to Virginia Tech, and a number of things were happening relative to getting rid of Virginia State, elevating Richard Bland to be a four-year college, naming it then Southside University. And they came to see me and the Black Caucus. There were three of us. And one of them had been sworn in. Two of them had been sworn in, I hadn't. One had been elected a month earlier, and the other had been elected 2 years earlier. And I said to the group that we saved the school. And I said, with just the three of us. And I look at the numbers today of the elected officials. I look at the disappearance of the groups that made so much possible. Those groups are not there. The communities are bereft of people there on a regular daily basis. You mentioned what's going to take place tomorrow. Look at the pictures of the civil rights movements. Look at the pictures of the people who were marching. Look at the pictures of those who sat at the bus room counters, dressed, coat and tie, hats, disciplined, prepared to do everything that was necessary to criticize what was wrong and to demand what was right, and paying the ultimate sacrifices. And yet on too many instances today, we are told, don't do that. You're going against the grain. So someone asked me the other day at an event at my alma mater, Virginia Union University, how did you feel when you came up politically always going against the grain? I said, well, two things. First of all, I never, ever let criticism crush me, because if I had succumbed to flattery, it would have. And they didn't understand what I meant by that. So you call the honorable this and that, or this good man. That's just like water on a duck's back. Everything you do, the very first thing I did when I got into the legislature, as the book will tell you, I had no idea we had a state song that said, "Carry me back to old Virginia." That's where this old dark is hard and long to go. The second stanza is even worse. It says, even in heaven, the old master and old missus and I won't be separated no more. I said, how? And I had never made a speech in the Senate. I had been elected, I think, I'd been in the office for about 2 months. They said, that's the end of Wilder. Won't see him anymore. He's gone against the grain. And that's what we don't have today, going against the grain. And who planes the wood to establish where the grain should go? Who writes the music in terms of what I should sing? And today I don't see those voices rising up in righteous indignation for the denial of human rights, not racial rights. And so I say to young people particularly, don't let anybody tell you, particularly the millennials, that you're out of touch. Stay out of touch. Stay out of touch with that false reality that you hear so many times, people saying you've got to do this, you don't have to do anything other than that which you believe is in your heart to be right. And to the extent that our young people, don't forget that so many and too many people sacrifice so much for us to be where we are. I give my book the name Son of Virginia. Why? Because I'm all that was good, bad, and ugly that should come of Virginia. Someone is going to see me one day this week to ask me, I think my sister told me, who were the people that inspired you when you were coming up? Can you name a historical figure that inspired you? The first name that came to my mind was Nat Turner. (1831). He had the temerity to say, no more of this. I'd rather die than to be a slave. And so when you say that, in many quarters, people think it's bad. Took me 8 years to get a holiday for Martin Luther King bill passed. 8 years. I'd get it passed in the Senate, the House would kill it. I'd get it passed in the Senate and the House, the governor would veto it. Get it passed in the Senate, the House would kill it. Get it passed in the Senate and the House, another governor vetoed it. But we in Virginia got a holiday for Martin Luther King before the national holiday. We in Virginia were able to say that we're going to have fair housing laws. We were in a position to do other things in Virginia that people said couldn't be done. And so when I said I was going to run for governor, they said, well, Lieutenant Governor, maybe we saw that. We thought you were crazy then. But now, you have absolutely got to be insane. You can't, not in Virginia. I said, well, why not? Well, a lot of people think Virginia has this massive number of African-American voters. Virginia's voting population is only 15% African-American. Many people don't think that. And so when I was elected, they would say, what are they putting in the water in Virginia that you got elected? I got elected because the people of Virginia shouldn't be judged by the past, but by the present and by the future. I have had misconceptions that I've been cured of. And so the direct answer to your question, April, is that where I think we are today is in need of stridence, need of going back and looking to see from whence we've come, and to understand that we have got to regird, reaccelerate, reinvigorate, and encourage all people to make America the better place than it is today.
Wow. Amen. That from the elder statesman, Governor Doug Wilder. And you touched on something. We are a nation that's the sum of our parts. And I want to go to you, Professor Glaude. If we are a nation that's the sum of our parts, we're seeing tonight New Hampshire. We're seeing a contest there. We're seeing voter ID issues there. We're seeing 30 states plus that have voter ID issues. We have to present an ID. And I've been talking to many people. I've never heard of cases where people try to impersonate someone going to the polls. So talk to me about this issue and the democracy that is in play with voter ID and race.
Well, first, let me thank you. This is such an honor. I'm from Mississippi, so I'm in high cotton right now. High cotton right now. I also want to say I taught at Bowdoin, but I'm currently at Princeton. I should have saw that.
Yes, All right. Yes. What is
Yeah.
that? What is that?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a lot of my Princeton students former students are out there, so I'm at Princeton now as chair of African American Studies. Let's talk about voter ID laws, because you have to talk about voter ID laws in the context of a concerted effort to undermine democratic processes in this country. And we have to just tell the truth. There has been a systematic attempt on the part of certain parties in this country to undermine particular voting populations that support particular kinds of policies. So there's been a systematic attack on labor, on public unions, because of what public unions stand for. Everyday ordinary workers. There's been a systematic attack on immigrants, on undocumented workers, right? On black and brown people. There's been a systematic attack on black folk. Now, it seems to me that if we're a democracy, truly a democracy, we'd want to do everything we can to have everybody vote. But there's a concerted effort in this country to ensure that certain demographics, certain constituencies don't make it to the polls. And this is particularly the case as the demographics of the country change, right? As we know that we're becoming a majority-minority nation, and folk are scared, scared to their core. And I want to say this. In my book, I begin with an assumption. And it's an assumption that informs the voter ID laws. It's an assumption that informs the vitriol that I think undergirds the Tea Party. It's the assumption that is shaping the current Republican response to the president's budget, even though I'm critical of the president. But it's the backdrop to all that is happening. And that is in this country, there's what I call the value gap. We can talk about the achievement gap and the empathy gap, but what's underneath that is something much more fundamental, and that is the value gap. That in this country, there's the belief that white people matter more. And that to the extent that belief obtains, no matter what the inputs are, the outputs will still be the same. We will still have a country fundamentally organized, right? Fundamentally organized to produce racial inequality. So whether it's in the context of slavery, whether it's in the context of Reconstruction, whether it's in the context of the Civil War, or whether it's in the context of a black man in the White House, as long as you have the value gap, the belief that some people in this country matter more than others, that belief evidencing itself in our social practices, that belief evidencing itself in our political arrangements, in our economic realities, we're going to see disenfranchisement. My colleagues at Princeton, Martin Gillens, say we are no longer a democracy, we're an oligarchy. They've done the work. Scholarship is saying that, making that claim. But the question is why? Because there's a belief that somehow, if we have a country that is fully and truly inclusive, somebody's going to lose something. And if that somebody happens to be the folk who are valued more than others, then folk will tear this country down to secure that privilege. Does that make sense? Obviously, I'm going to say some things that might make you uncomfortable. I don't care.
Ooh, okay.
And the reason I don't care is because the stakes are too high. The stakes are too high. When we think about 50 years later, Sister April, when we think about 50 years later and we look at our communities, 240,000 homes lost during the housing crisis. 38% of our children are growing up in poverty. In places where I grew up in Mississippi, 50% of black children are growing up in poverty.
And you have Appalachia in Mississippi, correct?
No, Appalachia is like kind of cuts down
Yeah.
to your territory in West Virginia. We have the Delta, right? And so part of what I'm saying is that the crisis in terms of jobs, in terms of education, in terms of mass incarceration, we're talking about a community that is under siege, right? And we need to be screaming from the rooftops.
Wow. Hashtag more than a month. And let's talk about living in two worlds. Yeah. For many African Americans, you wear the suit, you assimilate, but there's still that pain of the poverty, the blight, the streets of Baltimore. And we have someone with us who talked about self-discovery. And could you talk to us about that in this age? You know, you and I were kids in Baltimore. I mean, there before the grace of God, go I. And for many of you who don't understand that term, we could have been the Freddie Grays, for real. And I'm going to talk to an esteemed doctor that's here tonight. When I say Freddie Gray was a kid. You all know the story. But the backstory, Freddie Gray was a kid who had lead poisoning. Okay, and then he wound up, you know, when you have lead poisoning, I'm told by the great doctor here, your brain shrinks. And different things happen. It's a spiral, there's a lost generation. So talk to me about living in two worlds and self-discovery at a time when there's still oppression, whether it's not strange fruit hanging from a tree anymore, but it's a different oppression. It's a different way of walking the walk. Talk to me about that, Westmore, please.
Thank you, and again, thank you, April. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor being on this panel, and it's an oppression that isn't just present. It's an oppression that's suffocating because it surrounds you in everything that you are, and it reminds you with every minute of your day. You know, I think back about last April, and I can tell you, for most Baltimoreans, at least for most Baltimoreans who are paying attention, when everything happened last April, every Baltimorean was heartbroken, but most Baltimoreans were not surprised. It was not a shocking occurrence of what happened. And I'm talking about not just what happened to Freddie Gray, because frankly, to know the name Freddie Gray, if you're from Baltimore, it means you also know the name Chris Brown. It means you also know the name Tyrone West. It means you also know that these things have been happening. This type of oppression and brutality had been happening to Baltimoreans long before Freddie Gray. But it wasn't just about that. It was about everything that happened post the murder of Freddie Gray. And I had a friend who pointed something out to me, and I'm really glad he did, because he said, because oftentimes I get the question where people will ask, so what will happen? The police officers are all on their trials right now for what happened to Freddie Gray last April. And oftentimes I'll get the question where people will say, so what's going to happen to Baltimore if there's no prosecutions? What's going to happen if there's acquittals across the board, or there's hung juries across the board for the officers? And I tell people that actually, that question's an important question. The question that I think is almost the more important question is what happens if we're all just sitting around waiting to figure out what happens with these trials? As if that alone is going to fix and or solve the things that have been going on in Baltimore long before last April. And so when you look at that video of Freddie Gray, my friend challenged me to do something, and I did it, and I'm glad he did. He said, go YouTube that video again. And he said, but next time when you YouTube the video of Freddie Gray's arrest, don't look at Freddie Gray. And don't look at the police officers. Look at everything else. Look at the neighborhood. Look at the homes. Look at the fact that that video was taken at 8:46 in the morning, and how many people are just standing around on the streets with their phones taking pictures. Not on the way to work, not on the way to school. At 8:46 in the morning in the Sandtown-Winchester neighborhood of Baltimore, a neighborhood that is 1.5 miles away from the Guilford neighborhood of Baltimore. And despite being 1.5 miles away in terms of geographic distance, there is a 20-year life expectancy difference between Guilford and Sandtown-Winchester. This is not just present, it's suffocating. And, you know, it's interesting because we'll talk about what are the things that we need to do to be able to combat not just racial, but racist impacts. And, you know, one thing I firmly believe is that when people say, well, the only way you're going to actually change people's, you know, opinions and change what they do is actually if we change their hearts. And I agree with that. Listen, I think we have to, the most effective and the most lasting way that we're going to be able to address these issues if we're able to have honest conversations about people's apprehensions and people's fears on both sides so that we can better understand where we are and what we need to do to actually have progress. But at the same time, simply waiting for people's hearts to change is not going to be enough. And I think Dr. King said it best when he said, laws don't change hearts, but laws can protect us from the heartless. And so we then have to think about what it means to come up in environments and in areas where you feel disenfranchised and you feel disillusioned from Jump Street. When you look at a kid like Freddie Gray, who again, you know, this was not, this was, I was reading an article.
He should not have been arrested.
Well, there was no grounds for his arrest. But in addition to that, I was reading an article where they talk about a doctor was looking at the lead poisoning level that he had within his body, and the word that the doctor said when they looked at the lead poisoning level in Freddie Gray's body was Jesus. Jesus. If we don't, and if we aren't able to understand and come to grips from our earliest ages, the way disparity and health discrepancies, housing discrepancies, policy discrepancies, education discrepancies, all these type of things, how they matter and how they impact and how they manifest themselves, then I think the idea of simply waiting for hearts to change is something that becomes a fool's errand.
Wow, thank you, Wes. So I'm very glad tonight that we have, since we're talking about lead poisoning, and not only just lead poisoning with Freddie Gray, but we're dealing with Flint, Michigan. The issue happened in Washington, D.C. There was a high number of numbers of lead in the water here. I think it was 2001 or something like that. With us tonight, we are pleased to have Dr. Melissa Clark, the author, and her book is for sale as well. Excuse me, doctor, I have what? She is a great doctor. She can break it down so well. So Dr. Clark, if you would stand so people can see you, talk to us about the effects of lead as it relates, whether it's Freddie Gray, whether it's people in Flint, wherever. Talk to us about the effects of lead.
Well, thank you, April, for having me. I'm really happy to be a part of the panel. And I think it's important to consider the effects of lead in sort of the greater context of health disparities and what Dr. Glaude said about certain lives mattering more than others. Because I think the policies and the systemic environment that leads to a Flint, Michigan is deeply rooted in the fact that decisions are being made in the context of different emphasis and different importance given to different lives. So specifically to talk about the effects of lead in children, lead in anybody, but specifically children because their nervous system is developing so rapidly. Lead is a nerve toxin. It causes problems with development of the nervous system, specifically the brain. So it leads to problems with lower IQ, with ability to pay attention, with behavioral health issues that can ultimately cause individuals to end up in the criminal justice system because they don't have the same capacity to make decisions as if they compared to their colleagues who have never been exposed to lead. And it doesn't really take that much lead to really cause an issue. One thing to also remember about lead poisoning is once it happens, the effects are not really reversible. There's no great treatment. You can get the lead out of the body, but once the damage has been done to the nervous system, it can't be changed. Sometimes it could be mitigated a little bit by a healthy diet and by educational opportunities. But then again, if you're existing within that greater context of an environment that is rooted in health disparities and economic disparities and educational disparities, then you're not, again, going to get those opportunities to mitigate what can be mitigated.
So, in touching on the issue of Flint, Michigan, and we all know what's going on in Flint, correct? Okay. Contaminated water. Would you drink yellow water? Seriously, would you
Brown.
drink brown, yellow, gold? I mean, would you drink that? So, 8,000 children. So with that, and adults, people are sick and have died. Is there a lost generation in Flint because of this water issue?
Unfortunately, I think so, and I think a lot of the health experts are agreeing that even though they have changed the source of the water from the river back to Lake Huron, that the damage, the corrosion that happened to the pipes have caused a continued leaching of lead into the water system, so that even though the water system has been changed back to Lake Huron, there's still going to be problems. Even with the filters on the water, the damage has already been done. Those children have been exposed to lead for almost 2 years now, and at a critical stage of their development, that damage was done. So unfortunately so.
Dr. Clark, thank you. The author of Excuse Me, Doctor, I Have What?
Thank you.
Thank you. I ask her questions quite a bit. We've got 4 minutes before we go to questions and answers. I want you guys to think of some questions. Our panel is here for you, and I want to ask the panel. I'm going to turn to them now and ask them for some solutions. We're looking for solutions. We know there's a problem. We articulated the problem, some of the problems. There's a large number of problems, but we articulated at least some of the problems. Now I want to ask each one of you in the order that we started with a solution. What are some of the solutions?
Well, I want to comment briefly on the matter of lead. Is this mic still on? I think it's on now. In my earlier career, I worked as a chemical lab specialist in toxicology in the medical examiner's office. Is the mic on? Yeah. I think this one is better. And
I love
yeah,
that bass in your voice.
took it, yeah. And so what happened, I had just come back from Korea working in the office, and we were examining with the silicotic lungs. And these coal miners in Southwest Virginia were dying. And if you've ever seen a silicotic lung, it's just like a piece of wood. It's so full of carbon that it's that way. So have these lives been wasted? Absolutely. They've been wasted. And someone asked me, say, if you had been governor of the state of Michigan at the time when they talked about converting from the river, from the lake to the river, what would you have done? I said, the first thing I would have done was tell me the purity of the water, examine it, let me see it, assure me that there will be no problems, and let me understand what the cost factors are. I wanted to say earlier, and I didn't say it, I have a one-word definition for government and a one-word definition for politics. What do you think it is? Help me out. Money. Now, I'm going to challenge any of you in here to name any proposition, any proposal, any subject that's being advanced at the local, state, or national levels that does not involve money. Let me hear from you. Now, so what does that mean? I never wanted to go into politics. And my daughter's here, she'll tell you. I've always told her I wanted to be able to live a better, more relaxed life. But I got to running my mouth all the time. Being mad about this, mad about that. People say, well, why don't you run? They didn't mean run for office. They mean run away from them. And yet, I came to understand that it wasn't a question of getting a fair slice of the pie. I wanted my hand on the knife that cut the pie. I wanted to know who was baking the pie, what ingredients are being put in it. And I wanted to be certain that if it's going to be money, where is it coming from? If it's going to be spent, on whom is it going to be spent? And are we going to be indebted? If so, for how long? And who's going to be paying the indebtedness? That is today's problem. What's going on in New Hampshire tonight? What are they arguing about? Money. Bernie Sanders is talking about giving too much away to some people, and others saying, wait a minute, he's crazy. And yet others are saying, well, you know, I might be just as crazy as he. But let's see. Now, the problems that we're going to be dealing with, I don't care how long we stay. We can stay until daybreak in the morning. We still will be talking about who are going to be the decision makers relative to the money. Where are the decision makers in Maryland or in Baltimore relative to what you saw in those pictures 8 o'clock in the morning? When I was in the legislature, before I went into the legislature, I could see kids in school. And then all of a sudden they were not in school. I'd come home from my law practice and they'd be on my steps. That's 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. I said, why aren't these kids in school? Because the compulsory school attendance law had been removed because of segregation. And so that was the money going to the private academies and the private schools. They didn't have to go to public school. We'll take state money and fund you. We stopped that. And so what I would say, and I meant to say this earlier when you asked the question, April, until we have the people who are representing us understand that the real job that they have is to make certain that we participate in the money. And what do I mean by participate in the money? The programs. All of the things that are happening. We're having a presidential race now. Everybody's out there. Everybody's saying, well, we got to do this. And I ask this question quite frequently. We got to make certain we don't lose the millennials. Got to have that vote. And we've got to be certain we get the women's vote, because if you don't get the women's vote, you know, we'll lose. We've got to be certain that we get the LGBT vote, because, you know, they're growing in numbers. We got to make certain that we get the Hispanic vote, because they're growing in numbers. How many of you in this room, I want you to raise your hands, have ever heard anyone say we can't win this election unless we get the African American vote? I've got a few of you. That's more than I've seen before. And I tell you, you say you heard that? Wait a minute. Where did you hear that? Beg your pardon?
He said when Obama was running.
What did he say? Oh, somebody said Mitt Romney couldn't win without the black vote. You see how it changes when he answers the question? Somebody else had the hand up back there. Put it back up.
You are being called out. There's
You
a gentleman
better
back
know
there.
it.
Can you give him a mic? Give him a mic.
No, put it up there.
Give him a mic, please. He's all the way in the back, way in the back.
Isn't it amazing? Only 2 people in this whole room. Well, actually, I'm gonna cut yours in half.
Governor, we have to
All right,
get a
speak up.
solution. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
In 2010, I was in a U.S. Senate race in North Carolina. I actually met you back then.
I beg your pardon?
I actually met you during a 2010 U.S. Senate race in North Carolina. And in that race, the establishment, not publicly, but in private or, parties would say that we can't win without the black vote.
Wait a minute. They privately said it. Sit down. God, that's exactly what I mean. Oh, they'll come tomorrow and they'll say those results in New Hampshire might not be what we need, but you know what? We got a firewall somewhere. Whose firewall? Who built it? Who made it? Why do you take me to be your wall? What are you going to do? What have you done, and when are you going to do it? And to those extents, when this audience can say, as they have said to me, that they have not heard it, if you've not heard it here, what do you think John Doe hears in the street? What do you think you hear in the ghetto? What do you think you hear in Baltimore? What do you think you hear in Flint? Ferguson is only a mile from St. Louis. People don't know that. Look at these numbers of people you and I know who are representatives of that area. Where were they in all those times when the elected leadership of Ferguson was all white, notwithstanding? So the fault tomorrow, as they said, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. Our fault is ours because we need to demand more for our vote, and we haven't done it.
Wow. Yeah.
Profound.
So I think we need to do a couple of things. One, I think we need to offer the proper description, diagnosis of the problem. And one of the things we tend to do is we tend to identify racism, the state of black America, with these loud racists, the folk who are showing up at Trump's rallies, the folks who are supporting Mark Rubio and Ted Cruz, the folk who are running around with sheets over their heads, or the folks who are saying that black folk are just lazy and they don't want to do anything and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And we want to say that those are the bad people over there. They have bad views, right? But what I want to suggest is that the value gap isn't really sustained by those loud racists, right? That's too easy because it lets us off the hook because we can displace all the bad stuff onto the so-called bad people. What I want to suggest is that there are racial habits that we have to undo, that we all have, right? So I tell the story in my book about the first time I was called a nigger. I said the N-word, right? I don't care.
No, nigger is what you were called.
That's right. Right. And so we had moved from one side of town to the other, from the east side to the west side in my little small town of Moss Point. And my dad was the second person hired at the black person hired at the post office. So we were living in high cotton, right? Middle class existence. But now they've attacked the post office, right? So we're moving. We got a big house on the hill. I'm playing with my Tonka truck outside, and I hear the white kid's parents say, "Stop playing with that nigger." I grab my truck. I run inside. It's the first time I've ever been called that word. Now, that's what we usually describe. That's how we usually talk about racism, right? Some child is wounded by a mean-spirited parent who calls them the bad word, and that child has to spend the rest of her life responding to that, proving that she is not that. But what's interesting is that I knew already at the age of 8 that we were moving from the black side of town to the white side of town. How did I know that? Because in my old neighborhood, when it rained, it flooded because the pipes were bad. We didn't have sidewalks. There was just dirt roads. They was just dirt roads. You hear my language? Our baseball diamond, the grass was never cut. Schools, bad. Homes, smaller. Jobs, cycles of unemployment, being laid off because of the paper mill, the shipyard. I had already learned the value gap in the very places I lived. I wasn't called a nigger then. So we need to begin to understand that we learn these racial habits in the very spaces we navigate. It's in our built environment. Right? Our built environment. 1968 was the last year a major piece of legislation was passed to try to undo Jim Crow, try to undo the legacies of slavery. That's the Fair Housing Act. Just 12 years later, Reagan's elected. 12 years, Reagan's elected. They are trying to undo it, and they have succeeded. So first of all, we have to describe the problem better, the value gap. What do we need? We need a revolution of value. We need to change how we view government. I'm trying to answer April's question. We need to change how we view government. We change how we view government by changing what we demand of government. We've been sold a bill of goods that big government is bad, it's socialism, that we don't need a social safety net, blah, 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 all because we have what? The 1% that's steadily trying to rob everyday, ordinary people in the name of safety and security, in the name of a kind of bigotry that exploits in some ways your sense of vulnerability. That's the first thing. We've got to change our demand of government. Secondly, we've got to change our view of black people. We're not lazy. I've never met a black person who loves being poor. Now, I've met some black people who are knuckleheads because we're human beings. We're human beings. So we have black people just like everybody else who make bad decisions. But it's not the case that everyday ordinary black people are making bad decisions. Millions of thousands of them are all making bad decisions simultaneously to reproduce the condition of the ghetto, when we know that the ghetto is a function of state policy. It's a function of policy. That's the first thing. We have to change our view of black people. I'm sorry, I'm being emotional because I'm not going to get much else in. We're going to change
Yes,
our
you
view.
will, I promise.
We're
You
going
will.
to change our view of black people, but in order to change our view of black people, we got to change our view of white people. And the only way we're going to change our view of white people, listen, is that white people got to kill the idea of white people. That somehow you deserve something more. That somehow racial equality is a zero-sum game. That we're taking something from you in order to make something right. Black folk aren't the reason why your wages are flatlining. Undocumented workers aren't the reason why your houses aren't worth anything. But somehow these people bear the brunt of your sense of vulnerability. We got to change how we view white people. If we're going to, and that means we're going to change how we view black people. And the last thing we have to do is that we have to change what ultimately matters to us. We can't have a society organized around selfishness and greediness, society organized around narcissism, competition, and rivalry. We have to have a robust sense of the public good where we can care for each other, where our hearts matter, where we're willing to sing off key because everyone else singing are so adjusted to injustice. Right? Y'all feel me?
Adjusted to injustice.
Right?
That's powerful.
So part of the work that we have to do is change the very idea of who we are. And that's going to take a strategy in the streets, a strategy in the courtroom, and a strategy in the ballot box. Right? We're going to have to get in the streets and we're going to have to challenge this country. We're going to have to challenge the 1% and the 0.01%. 62 people in the world own as much as 3.5 billion people in the world. That's evil. That's evil. We have people right here in D.C. You walk by them every day, freezing to death, in the richest country the world has ever seen. That's evil. That's evil. So we have to begin to fundamentally understand what are the principles that motivate how we live in the world. And we have to say to ourselves that the options that are in front of us are not the only options we have. And that we have to begin a revolution not just simply by celebrating the celebrity of Bernie Sanders, but by beginning to believe that revolution is possible. By opening our imaginations to see that this world can be different and that we can help make it different. Otherwise, to hell with it.
Straight out of Princeton, straight from Princeton. And for equal time on the Democratic side, there is someone called Hillary Clinton, okay? For equal time on the Democratic side, there is someone called Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, and now West, and everyone, if you're really interested in the conversation, come on up, ask questions. We're having a civil conversation on a needed topic, issues of race. We love tonight, and we're going to go to Wes now with his solution.
Well, first thing, amen and an amen. You know, when I think about the solutions, it comes back to the fact that we have to be willing to be more empathetic. We have to be willing to make ourselves more uncomfortable. And we have to be willing to actually understand the situations that other people are actually in. Because oftentimes we find ourselves in this position where we somehow think that if we can just move things around the edges, that we're somehow going to make the progress that's necessary. Where we can look at, you know, and Governor Wiley, you said, well, we can look at philanthropy and somehow think that, you know, some faux concern for the next person with your philanthropic gifts is somehow making things any better for them. Not understanding that all it's doing is simply making you sleep better at night. But it's not fundamentally changing the equation of that person's life. If we're not talking about capital inclusion, and if we're not talking about ownership, and if we're not talking about equity, then we're simply talking about moving things around and helping us get to sleep at night better. If we're not talking about being able to change things and move it from a political sense, from a business sense, from a social sense, and have a true sense of empathy about what that means, is that we can work things around the edges for the public school system, but you know what, if it doesn't impact my child, then I don't have the same level of concern. We can talk about moving things in terms of better mass transportation for other people, but if I never ever have to worry about mass transportation, then I don't have that level of concern. If we can talk about how these structural institutions that in many cases were built on exclusion and not moving things around the edges, but a fundamental dismantling and a reevaluation of what it means to be a society that's inclusive and a society that's truly loving and not cherry picking in the love. And it also means that we have to make ourselves a bit uncomfortable, and we have to have a great understanding of what other people are going through. And I'll tell y'all real quick about a very quick example in my own life, and it wasn't on this issue, but I got very involved in the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal movement. And it wasn't because the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law directly impacted me, because it didn't. Until it did. Because when I was 13 years old, I met a man who changed my life. He was 18 years old. He was on his way to becoming an Army officer. He became my big brother when I got sent away to a school for some stuff I got caught up in. And he was a person, one of the true people that showed me that my actions matter to more than just myself. That there was a level of accountability that was going to come in me, and he was going to be there when I did well. He'd be there to congratulate me, and if I did something wrong, he'd be the first one to find out, and he'd be the first one to let me know. He didn't just become my big brother. He eventually became a real-life brother to me. He was one of the groomsmen in my wedding, one of my best friends. And I introduced him to another friend of mine, and she was beautiful, and he was an Army officer, and he left the Army after about 3 years, and I never was quite sure why. And I introduced them, and I thought they got along, and I talked to her, and I was like, what do you think of my friend Ty? She's like, oh, he's great. And I was like, oh, great. Do you mind if I give you a number? Because I really wanted them to link up, because it's good when friends get together. It makes things easier. And so she says, of course, give my number. So I call him. I say, call Tanya, she's great. He's like, yeah, she's great. I was like, yeah, give her a call. And a week goes by, he doesn't call her. And now she's calling me saying he didn't call yet. So I'm like, all right, Ty, what's going on? I'm like, give her a call, man. He's like, yeah, listen, Wes, I'm not attracted to her. I'm like, she's beautiful. What do you mean you're not attracted to her? What are you talking about? And then he explained to me why he wasn't attracted to her. He explained to me why that he wasn't going to call her. He explained to me why he had to leave the military after 3 years, because he had the audacity to tell his commanding officer the truth about who he was. In a unit and in an organization where we pride ourselves on integrity, he got punished for telling the truth. And he says to me, he said, do you think I would choose for my father not to talk to me anymore? Do you think I would choose for friends now, when I tell them my truth, to act like I never existed in their life? Do you think I would choose to give up an occupation that I loved because I was tired of lying both to myself and to them? And I started thinking to myself, and I said, you know what? If someone can make a legitimate argument to me that in some way this policy is helping to make our country safer, I'm listening. But nobody can make a legitimate argument to me that somehow keeping gays out of the military is somehow hurting our national security. If anything, I think keeping them out was hurting our national security. I changed, my heart changed. I got active and involved in that movement, and I cheered the day when that ridiculous law was lifted. Because I allowed myself to get into a place where discomfort was okay, and I allowed myself to understand where other people were coming from and why their pain should be my pain too. And that's the heart of what we're talking about when it means, what are the solutions that we have to do in order to truly lift a veil of racism that has covered the eyes of this country ever since its inception? We have to be prepared to understand that these are not marginal changes that have to be made. And we have to be comfortable with living in a sense of discomfort, that the fact that other people's pain should be our pain as well. We all just want to live in a society where people feel welcomed, where people feel that they can be proud of who they are and not be discriminated because of it. And I think that level of exposure and that level of time and that level of discomfort on so many different levels are the things that are actually going to be able to move us to a better place than where we are right now.
Thank you, Wes. It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. Now, if you have any questions, I want you to come forward or raise your hand. We're getting ready to do that, but we have a quick solution from Dr. Melissa Clark-Bruce. Thank you.
So I just wanted to talk about health disparities in the context of race in America today, because I started my career in the emergency department at Howard Hospital at the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. And in the emergency department, you see the names and the faces of health disparities. So the fact that young black men are 6 times more likely to be homicide victims, that young infants who are black are 4 times more likely to be low birth weight and suffer from low birth weight, that young children who are black are going to be twice as likely to witness domestic violence and 20 times more likely to witness a murder. And that's inevitably linked to the fact that childhood obesity is 25% more in African American children than in others, and also linked to the fact that chronic disease is going to be higher in the African American community when you take into account the mental health effects of these traumatic environments that come about as a result of poverty. So when you talk about solutions to health disparities, we have to think systemically and not as a siloed issue that really is something that an individual or an isolated community has to fix. And so when we're talking about solutions, it's important to think about that fact and also think about it from an economic perspective. There was an excellent study done at Hopkins that talked about the fact that $300 billion is spent on the impact of health disparities in lost wages, lost productivity, premature death and disability, as in the case of Freddie Gray with lead poisoning, and what's going to happen with this generation of children. So looking at the solutions like increased access to health care from the Affordable Health Care Act is very important. We're talking about, this election, the stakes, talking about repealing Obamacare, quote unquote. What's that going to mean to the 17 million people that now have access to health insurance? What's that going to mean to the federally qualified health centers that are funded, that take care of individuals who don't otherwise have access to care? So I think it's really important when you talk about solutions to talk about solutions globally that impact health care. So there are a lot of demonstration projects going on now that talk about how to better deliver health care in the context of, say, transportation issues and other issues that impact utility issues, being able to pay for power to keep your insulin cold, for example, and other issues that impact social determinants of health, and taking care and identifying those issues in a primary health care setting, and making sure that those issues of social determinants of health and also mental health care, the effects of trauma that we talked about, witnessing trauma on mental health and physical health, be identified and taken care of in that context. So I'm going to stop here because I know I'm going on, but again, looking at these solutions to healthcare issues in this broader context of poverty, race, social determinants of health, and getting access to quality care across the board.
Thank you, Dr. Clark-Bruce, for that much-needed perspective. And we're going to go to our first question. We're so glad that the governor's back with us. And yes, sir. Go ahead.
First question.
It's very difficult to just ask a question. I'll simply ask a question of you. How many of you have heard of Nanny Helen Burroughs? Very few. We're having a program on May the 14th, which is celebrating Nanny Helen Burroughs Day in Washington. How many people know that May 10th is Nanny Helen Burroughs Day in Washington since 1975? Very few of you. So I'm going to ask you to consider looking at Nanny Helen Burroughs' views and visions, because I believe if we look at what she did between 1879 and 1961, we have some answers to what's being proposed here today. And I'll simply say that in 1900, she wrote 12 things the Negro must do for himself. She also wrote 12 things white folks must stop doing. So I think if we can open our minds and think about what she did and how she did it, we might have some answers. For politicians, she simply said, politicians are the bargaining block. They can be bought and sold. They're corrupt in both parties.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
And let's try to keep our questions as question form. May I have the hands for next question, please? Thank you. I'll try to move around the room. Let's keep our questions brief because of the amount of time
We have the
available.
gentleman that came up to the microphone, and then we'll come back to him.
Hi, my name's Christian Smotherman. I'm a former student of Dr. Gilad. This question's directed to Dr. Gilad. I read in your book that you made a suggestion that I thought was very intriguing, but also for me a little confusing, that we push for something called a blank out campaign. Now, I and a group of other students from Princeton are currently working on a project to create a grassroots movement called Ballot Blackout. And so what we want to do is push something called a blackout campaign, which really inspires and encourages young African Americans, black voters to go out and vote, but not only do that, inspire these voters to hold their leaders accountable. The question I have for you is, what would you say to a group of students like us who have changed that N to a C? And what would you say to me to make me question that and think about why a blank out campaign might be a better alternative?
So let me say it this way. I wrote that when it seemed as if Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton were going to be the nominees for the two parties. But I still think the idea holds. So the blank out campaign comes from, I love fiction. Fiction is all throughout the book. One of my favorite novelists is José Saramago, a Portuguese novelist. Many of you might have read Blindness. But he has a novel entitled Seeing. And at the heart of the novel is this idea that voters turn out in massive numbers for an election, and they count the ballots, and 80% of them are blank. And then they go back and said something must have happened, so they hold another election, and the same thing happens. And so what Saramago says is this was in effect a bloodless revolution, that the people used the democratic process to say that these choices aren't ours. So part of what I was trying to do is respond to something that Governor Wilder described, and that in so many ways that African Americans' participation in the democratic process in the United States, and that's in inverted commas, has historically been distorted and disfigured. And political scientists, going back to Ron Waters and others, my own colleague at Princeton, Paul Freimer, have described black voters as a captured electorate, that the Democrats know that they don't have to deliver. The only thing they have to do is turn us out every 2 to 4 years. The Republican Party doesn't really have to show any interest in us. They just need to cream off a certain percentage so that we won't turn out in large numbers to impact the decision. The Democrats turn us out, they get in office, and then they fail to deliver. They have to govern. They have to lift all boats. They can't speak to the specificity of our condition. They can't talk, I'm the president of all America, not the president of black America, right? We didn't ask you that. We voted for you at 93%. Right?
Uh-oh, now you treading
Well,
on
no,
some
got to
bad
tell the
water
truth
out
no
there.
matter
I'm
where
here.
you are. You got to tell the truth no matter where you are, right? And so part of what I was saying is, what would it mean for us to short circuit this process? Because you have black political elites who make their money by delivering us every 2 to 4 years, like we're cattle chewing cud, right? So we get all that GOTV money, and folk, you know what I'm talking about, folk running how I'm going to be the person to deliver the black vote for you today, right? And so part of what I was saying is, how do we short circuit this thing? Because we have to do something dramatic in order to salvage democracy. And one of the things I said, we should turn out in massive numbers without President Obama on the ballot. In massive numbers. But affect everything downstream. Affect local elections, county elections, state elections, impact who's going to sit in the gubernatorial seat, state legislators, right? And leave the presidential ballot blank. Unless one of these candidates specifically says something that speaks to the specific conditions of black folk, offering us specific policies that will deal with historic double-digit unemployment, that will deal with the housing crisis, that now that the wealth gap is 13 times that of white wealth is 13 times that of black wealth, that will deal with the fact that 38% of our children are in poverty, that will deal with the fact that municipalities are closing budgets on the backs of our schools, that will deal with the fact that municipalities are raising revenue on the backs of poor communities. In other words, how do we think strategically and tactically about our vote? Now, some people will say that's giving up the vote. I'm saying no. I'm saying no, that it's trying to, how can I put this, create a civic power outage so that we can reboot this thing. It's just an idea, a provocation. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
I don't know if we can, though.
No, we don't have time. Can we save it for later?
Yes or no, can you help us do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Hi, I'm Sharif Muhammad, and I go to the School for Ethics and Global Leadership. I was wondering, as a young black male, and this is for everybody, what advice can you give me on how to pursue a higher education?
I like that.
Bless you, Sharifa. Thank you. So first, let me just say how proud that I am that you even asked that question, because this is not just a question of kind of like a larger societal, structural, individual thing, right? I get very frustrated sometimes when I hear, and I have friends, many of whom who all have like double Harvard degrees, who will make the argument to me about how they don't think that higher education is important anymore. How it's not useful, and it's not necessary, and we can train kids to do X, Y, and Z, and they'll always give the same examples. They'll always say, well, Bill Gates doesn't have a college degree, and Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have a college degree, and Steve Jobs didn't have a college degree, and all that kind of stuff. And my answer to them is that's absolutely right. But the truth is, had Facebook never taken off, and had Apple just remained a fruit, they would have been just fine. They would have been just fine. You don't understand my story without the importance that higher education played to not just make sure that I can get into any room that I'm in now, but also to remind me every single day that I belong in every single room that I'm in. And so when I think about the advice, the first thing that I'll say is never forget the importance of what we're talking about. Because there will be people who will question it. There will be people who will tell you and who will say, well, this is not important, and that is not important, and all these type of things. Everybody has an opinion, and that's perfectly fine. But I try to live by a model of don't let things that don't matter too much matter too much. You know what you have to focus on and why this becomes so important. A lot of the work that we do right now, I run a platform called Bridge EDU. And what Bridge EDU does is we basically work primarily with community colleges, HBCUs, public institutions, and we help to address the college completion challenge by reinventing the freshman year of college. Because we know that that's generally the strongest choke point for most students, that if you can get momentum in that first year, that matriculation is not momentum, right? Simply because you enrolled does not mean you got momentum. And oftentimes we have many students who will then start, never finish, and then have debt and no degree. And when we think about the case of a place like Baltimore, and I'll say Baltimore for example, right? In Baltimore, by the year 2020, 80% of all jobs in Baltimore City will require some form of post-secondary credentialing, right? Trade school, community college, four-year college, something. Something past Frederick Douglass High School. And currently in Baltimore City, 2/3 of all Baltimore City high school graduates, 6 years after finishing high school, will have nothing.
Exactly.
So we have a situation where we are going to have jobs, and the majority of the population will not be qualified to fill them. And then what happens then? As you're going through that process, making sure that you understand the importance of what you're doing and why you're doing it, making sure that we can take advantage and full advantage of all the structural things that are there now. So for example, the amount of students who do not properly fill out the FAFSA. I can tell you right now, we asked and we since changed the question, but we asked our scholars, how many of y'all fill out the FAFSA? 100% said absolutely fill out the FAFSA. The truth is 84% had not. They'd started it. They might have filled out a certain page, but they are leaving thousands of dollars on the table because of simple processing that we have to make sure that we fulfill. So making sure that we're taking full advantage of all things that are there, then also, and finally, part of the stickiest process of higher education is making sure that you understand the validity not just for yourself, but also for other people. And making sure that you then become very quickly part of that larger solution. I tell our students all the time, you get asked that question immediately when you get to college, say, what's your major? And what are you studying? And you're gonna get asked that question until you're blue in the face, until they're blue in the face, because you're gonna start thinking that's the only question that's ever gonna matter. And the truth is, I finished my undergrad experience now 14 years ago, and nobody ever asked me, Wes, what was your major in college? That question is gonna fade. The question that will never fade, and the question that will help keep all this stuff relevant to you, is who will you choose to fight for? You keep that question at the heart of your higher education experience, because if you simply walk across a graduation stage with a piece of paper, you have missed the point. But if you walk across a graduation stage, not just with momentum, but with a clear sense of why you're there and who you're supposed to be fighting for, that's the thing that will carry you, not just through college, but the thing that will carry you through the remainder of your days. So your work will live on long after you never even do anymore.
I want to say something to you. You touched my heart. I grew up on a college campus as a child, Morgan State University. And my mother was the director of student activities there until her death 9 years ago. And I want you to go to school. There is at least one college administrator in this audience. I'm going to pair you with him. And he doesn't want me to put him on blast, but he's here. And he's from Georgetown University. Are there any other college administrators here tonight? Well, I want to put you with him so you can find out about programs and what have you to begin the process for you to go. Because let me tell you something. Right now, if you don't have a college degree, you are behind the curve. As a black man, as a black person, you are behind the curve. So you have to get a college degree. No matter what, you have to get a college degree. And the gentleman is in the back. Before this is over, I'm going to put you with him so you can talk, okay?
And
Thank you.
let me just say this really quickly. Begin the lifelong journey of reading. Yeah.
Wow, I'm about ready to
I'm
cry.
a country boy from Mississippi. I'm a country boy from Mississippi. I read my first 500-page novel underneath my bed because it was too much noise. And it was written by Terry Brooks, The Sword of Shannara. I love fantasy. Played Dungeons and Dragons. J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm a nerd, yeah, right? But then suddenly, I moved from Tolkien, Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
And then I found Ralph Ellison and Richard
Yes.
Wright and
Yes.
James Baldwin and Lorraine Hansberry.
Langston
And then I read
Hughes.
Dave Du Bois. Begin your lifelong journey of reading and just watch what happens. Boom.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, the gentleman is from GW, George Washington. I'm sorry, I'm not good with colleges tonight. I'm sorry, Princeton, I love you. New Jersey, thank you. Thank you. And GW, George Washington, his name is Mr. Eris D. Collins. He will be in the back waiting for you. Okay, next question. Yes.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Emma Ratchin from the School for Ethics and Global Leadership. I was wondering, how do you think race plays a factor in how we respond to international crisis?
Okay, she said, how do we think race plays a factor into international politics? Crisis.
Did you say, well, whether it's crisis or not, it's there. And the question presupposes that you likewise feel that, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have asked it. Is it a crisis? Yes. Does it play a factor? Does it play a part? Yes. When you hear people talking about carpet bombing areas and countries that don't necessarily look like those people who are saying it. When you look at the history of what has happened, the unfortunate thing that we are, in fact, the only country that has ever used atomic weapons for the destruction of human lives. We're not proud of it. Hopefully that should never happen again. But the real question is, who is in the room when decisions are being made? The war in Iraq never should have happened. People recognize that now, but look at the cost. It does play an enormous role, not just in the international crisis in Syria, but people are discovering that Africa has something other than animals, wild animals. Oil, wow, now everybody's there. The Chinese are there, the Japanese are there, and everybody else is coming there. You're looking at emerging nations everywhere. You're looking at the rise of the influence of China in the world. You look at the rise of the Indian economy. And so what are we talking about? Money. When you see China and India in a position to say, look, when you start talking about what's going to happen at the world markets, we are part of that. The Nissan comes up before the Dow. And that affects us, doesn't it? When you see stocks going down in China, look what happens in New York. And so we are all interrelated, and that's why it's so unfortunate that we can't talk to each other, settle our differences, and recognize that war is not going to be the answer. There is no such thing as making us stronger than any other people. We are not going to be any stronger than any other people can be. Oh, it'll be temporary. And so it's very unfortunate that race does play that part. The thing that I would like to know more than anything else is to be certain that when those discussions are taking place, when those decisions are being made, that everything is put on the table. And this is what you were talking about. My colleagues here have expressed it so beautifully. You put parts of a problem on the table and expect solutions unless you're willing to put everything on the table and see what the results would be. Hopefully, common sense might come to the next presidency who comes, and the next Congress that comes, and the next group of people who will be presiding, to understand that war is not the answer. And it's not just Marvin Gaye saying that. It ain't. And it never was, and it won't be. Defend ourselves, yes. But there again, I hate to get back to it, money. Don't you think we're talking about money? Eisenhower tried to tell us years ago that the industrial complex is something that the people of America need to guard against. Why do we need to continue to build and build and build? Where is that armament going? More tanks, more planes, more guns? For who? For what? North Korea just shot a missile in the air. We got enough to handle those people if anything ever happened. And they're not, why should we be afraid of them if they are not afraid of us? And so that's why we need to say, hey, North Korea, you have great. I was in South Korea and I fought, and I couldn't understand when I came back from Korea, why was I there fighting in Korea for the freedoms of South Korea when I wasn't free in America? I couldn't go to school. I couldn't go to law school in Virginia. I had to go to Howard University. I couldn't do the kinds of things others could do, and yet I had to fight for the freedoms of other people and not have them myself. Yes, race has played and still does play a part in our relations, nationally or otherwise.
Really quickly, we have to dispel the view that America is the beacon of freedom. Once we kind of really interrogate our foreign history of foreign policy, we'll understand Haiti today. We would understand Cuba today. We will understand our role, right, in Africa today. There's a debate at Princeton around Woodrow Wilson, one of the architects of modern liberalism, League of Nations, right? Fundamental philosophy informing his foreign policy. Aryanism, white supremacy, right? And so once we begin to tell a thicker story about our history, right, we can begin to see its lingering effects in our current policy. So race has always been, right, a critical component of how we've imagined ourselves, as Ronald Reagan said, channeling his John Winthrop, as the shining city on the hill.
Wow, one more question. We have time for one more. And you know what? I know there are a lot of questions. You know what we did last time? We did a round robin. I want to ask everyone I don't have enough paper here. Write it on this. If you have a pen, can we get some pens? Write some of the questions, some of the answers on these sheets of paper. Because I'm going to get you all to ask your question really fast. We're going to write it down, and we're going to try to do a round robin.
Also, you know, we can do too if we have to go if they want to tweak their questions too.
If you want to tweet, that's why you are who you are. If you want to tweet your questions, we can also answer them via the Twitter. But let's do a real fast round robin of questions. No comments, please. Just real fast so we can write them down and we can try to answer. This young lady, and then let's go.
Very brief, so we can get this.
Just ask your question fast, please. Rapid fire.
Hi, I'm Maria Katsulos. I also go to the School for Ethics and Global Leadership. I was wondering how we, young people of color, Latino, Black, how can we band together to fight against a government that's totally against us?
Okay, next question. How do we band together to fight a government that's totally against us?
Dr. Glaw, can you speak a little bit about what's going on with your colleague, Dr. Perry, out in Princeton?
Okay, next question.
Part of fixing the future is changing the present. What do you recommend for me as a young black male in America in our current society to do and create positive change in our world?
Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm Tag Keano. I'm from the School for Ethics and...
You have to speak up because we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. I'm Tag Keano from the School for Ethics and Global Leadership as well. My question is, how do environmental issues and environmental justice and also environmental racism interact with racial issues today?
Katrina, that's one thing. I can give you that right there. A lot of times people, well, go ahead. Let's get the next question.
I think that was the last question.
That's the last question. Is that it for the questions? If you have questions in the back, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, there's a person over there on the side. Question, please, sir.
I'm a college. What do you think is especially important for young people today to understand regarding the messages to understand regarding the ideas communicated this evening?
Say this. Say this again.
What was the most important for young people what's the most important messages to gather from this evening?
You know what? I'm going to say something. We have a very diverse group of people here tonight. Civil discussion. That is something that you take away. To have these discussions started here and go out into the community, talk amongst yourselves and to others, not of just black on black talking to one another, but white people need to have the conversation, Latinos, Asians, everyone needs to have a conversation because there is indeed a problem in this nation. We are not post-racial, and don't let anyone make you believe that. We are not post-racial. We may be post-Obama come January 21st, 2017, but we are not post-racial. We are not a post-racial America. Go ahead, let's start the answering the questions.
Well, I'll take quick, and actually, very quick, I want to say, I actually don't think the goal is that we become a post-racial society. I don't want to be a post-racial society. I want to be a post-racist society. Amen. And because people should be proud of their culture. People should be proud of their history. People should be proud of their race. The idea isn't to be post-racial where we just look and say, I don't see color. I want people to see my color. And I also want them to know that I'm proud of my color and I'm proud of my history. What we don't want is for people for anybody to be discriminated because of their history or because of their culture or because of their race. There's a few questions here, actually, I think that kind of tie into a couple things, kind of the young people, the big takeaway, how do we change our present, and also how do we ban against the government. There's a tie in all this.
What is it, fight the power?
Fight
is that
the
what you're trying to...
There are a couple things that we know that are guarantees, right? we know there are a couple guarantees that are going to happen every single 2 years. We are going to have elections about who are our congressional representatives. Every 4 years, we are going to decide who are mayors, who are governors, who is our president. And every 6 years, we are going to decide who are our senators. I actually think the most powerful thing that we can do to change our present and band together against the government is make sure that the people who are actually sitting in those seats actually represent and are going to fight for our interests. And if not, they need to go. Because the truth is that we cannot like what's going on right now. And for many of us, we don't like what's going on right now on a local, state, national, whatever the level is. But the truth is Governor Wilde continues to point out, there are trillions of dollars at stake here that somebody is going to control. Someone is going to have to be able to allocate all those different resources. So I think the most powerful thing that we can do is to make sure that we are very clear and we are very consistent and we are very fierce about who it is that we want sitting in those seats and what it is that we expect from them once they get into those seats. People don't become great leaders. They are pushed to become great leaders.
And
that becomes our job.
I want to interject, and I want you to finish, but I want to interject something really fast. Look at this. I just got a CNN projection from New Hampshire. If you are interested on the Democratic and Republican side, Donald Trump on the Republican side won New Hampshire, and Professor Bernie Sanders won on the Democratic side. That's New Hampshire.